Good day, everyone. It's your host, Paul Lawrence Vann. Just wanted to share some things with you in terms of what has been taking place over the last several months. And the year 2024 has been just a wonderful year for me, not only with the podcast, but also with my book and also with speaking engagements. And so what has been happening lately with Wealth Academy podcast is that we just celebrated our 4-year anniversary. The very first episode that was produced on the show took place on August the 6th of 2020 during the COVID-19 time frame. And we've gone from 3 episodes on the very first day to 266 and counting. So things are going great. And I also added some injection into the podcast, meaning that I have some tweaks that I'm making to the platform itself in regards to also bringing on more guest experts and much, much more. But let's talk about the most recent activity that I've participated in. In August, the next to last week of August, I participated in what's called the Podcast Movement. And it's a conference that was held at the Gaylord National Harbor. So it gave me that opportunity to meet some tremendous podcasters from around the world. And some of the podcasters had multi-million-dollar podcast platforms that they work with. And then others are newbies and those of us who are in between. But what I learned from it was making connections with other podcasters from around the world. Some people from Israel, some people from South Africa, Japan, Canada, and even more in Mexico. And in that experience, what I learned is that there's more than one way to lead and produce a podcast episode and to also add value. So the most important aspect of podcasting is being able to offer great value to the audience itself. And I've learned a lot of that. Again, I met really successful podcasters. I met fellow podcasters and exhibitors. So there were a lot of people out there with a lot of different platforms, ways to add injection to your podcast, whether it's to get more visibility for it, how to go about growing your podcast, how to monetize the podcast, and then how to have that relationship between the guest hosts and the guest expert themselves. And as a result of that, it really is where I really gain a lot of information. And so the Podcast Movement Conference was one of the best conferences that I attended this year, and I'll be attending it next year in Dallas as well. But in the meantime, what has been happening with my podcast? I had been interviewing people leading up to what's called the Authorpreneur Summit and Book Awards. And so there were maybe 5 to 6 people from that community from the Bestsellers Guild that's hosted by Kathy Kay. And I was able to interview them, and they added value to my community, and it gave them an opportunity to share insight about what they offer their clients and their communities. And as a result of that, it really added a lot of value to my audiences. And what the goal that I have set for the month of September, which is my favorite month, by the way, because this is my birthday month, is to actually host an episode every day of the month of September, starting with today. Today is September the 1st. And then I will have a podcast. Some of them be solo, some of them would be guest experts. And through the connections that I made at the Authorpreneur Summit and Book Awards, in addition to the podcast movement, I have more than enough guest experts that will be on this platform providing insight to you, the subscribers, the followers, the listeners, the fans, and the family, as well as colleagues. And so it's really going to be a really wonderful experience. Now, let me share a little bit about what happened with the Authorpreneur Summit and the Book Awards. Well, what happened, it was maybe 15 to 20 authors, most of us best-selling authors, and we were interviewed by Kathy Kay as a part of the summit itself. And for example, with my particular interview, I talked about how a podcast can help authors, and in addition to that, coaches and contractors and consultants and speakers in ways of being able to get more visibility to enhance their brand, in addition to position themselves for more book sales. In fact, when it comes to podcasting, it's the fastest way to get more media for yourself. It's much faster than getting on a radio show, and it's much faster than getting on a TV show. Radio, for one, because you only have a set number of minutes that you can be on there, and TV is even less time that you would spend being interviewed by someone. But the podcast is really the way to go because there's so many podcasts that are out there. But what I tell people is what you have to do, you have to find out why you want to be on the podcast initially. Then you need to find out who is your target audience. It's just like for a speaker and person who is writing a book. It's not for everyone, but it's for a specific target audience in which you want to share your expertise. And by the way, when it comes to podcasts, you get more time to open up and share your insight and your expertise with the audience that are listening. And it's also evergreen, meaning that you will be able to have that interview and then point people to it on the host particular podcast platform, their podcast site, and also on sites such as Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Amazon Music, and even more, and iTunes. So some of the things that you want to look at is why you want to be on it. Then you need to come up with some topics. What are your main topics? What are you going to share with the audience? And then after that, you need to really build a relationship with the podcast host. And to me, this may very well be the most important aspect of being involved with a podcast guest. But the key is not to go on just one podcast and assume that you're going to sell a lot of books or get more visibility, but learning a process whereby you can get on multiple podcast platforms and get referrals. You can ask for referrals, and then you can refer other people. And then you can just hone whatever your message happens to be. And then after you're interviewed, you want to thank that guest and go out and provide them with a great rating on, for example, Apple Podcasts, a great rating and review, because all of it works hand in hand because you're building that relationship, not only with the podcast host, their platform, and their audience, but also for yourself. And what I really like to tell people who are really going for this in the podcast space is that in many ways, when you're a guest expert, you're really not what it's all about. It's really all about the audience of that podcast host, his or her audience. That's really what it's all about. And so there's a process and a way to do it. And when I went through the Authorpreneur Summit, I have, in fact, provided a free called the Ultimate Podcast Guest Checklist for Authorpreneurs. Now, you don't have to just be an author, but you can be a coach. You can be design courses, digital courses. You can be a consultant and many other ways, or as a speaker. But you can get a copy of the Ultimate Podcast Guest Checklist at the following site. And you can go to www.wealthacademyprograms.com, and you'll be able to see the particular platform I have set up out there, and you'll be able to download it with one click, and you'll be able to learn a lot more about it. And so that's really what I wanted to share with you today. And so let's talk about what's coming up for Wealth Academy Podcast. Well, I learned a lot from the podcast movement, and I'm going to tweak, I'm going to modify, I'm going to adjust my podcast platform, and I'm doing that so I can make it more user-friendly. I can make it more enticing for people to want to listen to it. And a lot of it has to do with the content that I'm going to be provided on it. So I'm going to be, of course, bringing on people who talk about finances, but I'll also be able to talk to people about mind, body, spirit, meditation. I'll talk to some people about how to get wellness through going through a divorce or through real estate, how to invest in real estate, all manner of things. And so by doing so, it gives a broader perspective in terms of what you can learn. I also want to share that if you go to LinkedIn, I have roughly over 50, almost 60 LinkedIn newsletters that are out there, and it's titled Leadership is Influence. And you simply go to www.linkedin.com/n/Paul Lawrence Vann, and you'll be able to read those newsletters that are out there, but they help with leadership. And that's something else that I really want to share, is that anytime that you're a business owner, small business owner, even a large corporation, you still are in a leadership position. And that's one of the reasons why during the Authorpreneur Summit that I put the focus on podcasting, because authors always have to be marketing. ABM it's called. And why is that so? This is why it's so. Even if you are a best-selling author 2, 3, 4 times over, if you're not selling your books and generating revenue as a result of it, then you're not leading. You should be out finding different ways, different platforms, whether it's a book signing, whether it's a collaboration, whether it's on a podcast, radio, or television. And you should always be marketing your book, and the reason why is because your sole intent and mission is on providing great value and expertise, wisdom, and knowledge to your target market. And if you don't provide this to them, they will get it somewhere else. So you and I may as well be the people who are providing them with the information that they need. So I want to talk a little bit now about book publishing, because I lead Laurel Reef Publishing, which means I write books and I publish them. And so I've written 3 books so far, and I have a 4th book that I'm just about to finalize and get it ready for publication. And the first book I wrote is called Living on Higher Ground. So it's more of a motivational book, a book that has some quotes in it, something to really inspire people. And that's the very first book I wrote. Then the second book I wrote is called Faith for Times Like Now. And it's really like a spirit-based book, a faith-based book to help people who are going through challenges and help them to overcome it, because we all go through something every now and then. And then thirdly, I wrote the book Leadership is Influence. And I wrote this book primarily because that is what I did for the duration of my professional career. Even though I was functionally a financial manager, cost analyst, budget analyst, I was also a leader, because I was a leader in the United States Air Force from the time I was second lieutenant until I retired as a lieutenant colonel about 20 years later. And in addition to that, I worked at Mobile Oil Company, which also added some more expertise to my professional life. And then after I retired, I became an entrepreneur. So I founded a company, and now I lead Wealth Building Academy LLC, which is a consultancy that works in the area of leadership consulting, also with some spiritual coaching, book publishing, also with some financial literacy, or what I call financial intelligence. And I provide these things primarily because those are some of the top things that people need. And so my last book is going to be on financial intelligence, because people are really struggling with the hyperinflation that's taking place now, with the price of food, price of vehicles, the price of housing, the interest rates are very high. So people are going through hyperinflation. And of course, right now, we know that there is some consideration to lowering the interest rates from the Federal Reserve. So it's very important for me to talk about those types of things that are taking place. And of course, we all know that there's an election year. And one thing I don't talk about on my podcast is I do not talk about politics. Sorry, I just don't have that kind of time. And so I'm sticking to what I believe that people can really need, something that they can use to help make their daily life better. If they have children, help to teach their children what to do. And I think that these things are very important. But as I stated, through the recent podcast movement, in addition to the recent Authorpreneur Summit and Book Awards that was hosted by the Kathy Kay, one of the most outstanding people in all the land, what I want to say is that I have a lot of podcast episodes coming up. I have a lot of guest experts that I will be interviewing. And then I have some collaborations that are coming up. I'll get the book completed probably by the end of September for solo book number 4. And I also have 3 co-authored books. And 2 of those are #1 international best-selling books. And I'm also an international speaker and an award-winning speaker as well. So there's a lot of things that I want to share with you, and I want you along for the ride and for this particular journey that's going to take place. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you on the next episode of Wealth Academy Podcast. And don't forget, go out there on Apple Podcasts and rate and review this particular episode, which is episode 267. And that will really help boost my podcast platform, and also provide that 5-star rating and a wonderful positive review, because all we're trying to do, all of us, is to have a better today than we had yesterday. And if and with God willing, that we could be able to go forward to tomorrow and be able to do the same thing. So again, my name is Paul Lawrence Vann. I'm the founder and host of Wealth Academy Podcast. I thank you so much. My time is up, and I thank you for yours. And have a great day. And recommend this particular podcast. Podcast itself, wealthacademypodcast.com, to your family, friends, and your colleagues. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you later. Goodbye.